They burned through my entire winter supply, every log I'd split, every bit of food I'd stored, just gone overnight. And 3 days later, their lake started drying up like it had never belonged there in the first place. Not a storm, not a leak, not some act of God, just a man turning a wheel they didn't know existed. And the truth is, I didn't even feel angry at first. Just quiet, the kind of quiet that comes when something finally makes sense in a way you can't ignore anymore. My name's Caleb Turner. I'm 54, spent most of my life working land most people drive past without seeing. Logging, fire control, a little bit of everything that keeps trees standing or falling when they're supposed to. I've got 40 acres up in northern Idaho, not far from a place called Elk Ridge, though town might be stretching it. One gas station, a hardware store that smells like dust and oil, and a bar where people mind their business unless you give them a reason not to. My place sits uphill from a newer development, something they built about 7 years back. They call it Silverline Estates, and it's exactly what it sounds like. Big homes, clean angles, oversized windows that look out over a man-made lake like it's something natural, something permanent. You got Teslas plugged into garage walls, outdoor kitchens nobody cooks in, lights that come on automatically like the place is alive without needing people. And then there's me, wood stove, backup generator, tools that have been repaired more times than replaced, a well pump that creaks when it's cold. My world smells like pine sap and diesel. There's smells like fresh paint and money. We coexisted fine at first. I didn't go down there. They didn't come up here, or at least not enough for it to matter. But what they never really understood is that the lake they built their whole view around runs on my water. My grandfather built a stone dam back in 1949, right where a spring-fed creek cuts through the ridge. It's not much to look at unless you know what you're seeing. Just old rock, iron hardware, something built to last instead of impress. That dam feeds into a spillway, and when it's open, the water runs down into a basin. The same basin they later turned into their lake. Back when my dad was alive, there was an understanding. No contracts, no lawyers, just a handshake kind of thing. You let the water flow, we stay out of your way. And for years, that worked. Nobody pushed, nobody tested the edges. Until they did. It started small, like most things do. People walking up near my lower fence line, treating an old logging trail like it was part of their morning routine. I'd see them from a distance sometimes, dogs off leash, headphones in, like the land didn't belong to anyone at all. One afternoon, I finally said something. Not harsh, just clear. Hey, this isn't public land. The guy I stopped, he looked confused more than anything, like I'd just interrupted something obvious. We were told this was shared, he said. Told by who? I asked. The HOA. That was the first time I really paid attention to those 3 letters. HOA, Homeowners Association. I'd heard of them, sure, but never had to deal with one directly. Where I come from, people handle things face to face, not through printed rules and committees. A few days later, I got my introduction. Her name was Denise Caldwell. Early 60s, sharp eyes, the kind of posture that makes it clear she's used to being listened to. She pulled up to my place in a dark blue SUV that looked like it had never seen dirt before, stepped out like she was walking into a boardroom instead of up a gravel driveway. Mr. Turner, she said, offering a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I'm the president of Silverline Estates. I nodded once. Didn't realize I was part of it. That smile tightened just a little. You're adjacent to it, which means your property affects it. Funny, I said, leaning against the porch post. Been affecting it for about 70 years without anyone complaining. She ignored that part. We've had concerns raised. Fire hazards, primarily. Yearwood storage, fuel, proximity to tree lines. It doesn't meet our safety standards. Our, I asked. The communities. I let out a small breath, not quite a laugh. I don't live in your community. She held my gaze, steady. You live above it. And there it was, not a request, not even really a warning, just a statement, like gravity. Like what she was saying didn't need to be agreed with to be true. I didn't argue. Not then. Just told her, my land, my responsibility, and left it at that. She nodded, said something about following up, and drove off. And for a while, nothing happened. Life went on the way it always had. Winter came, heavy and quiet, snow settling in deep, the kind that makes every prepared thing feel like it matters just a little more. I spent weeks cutting and stacking wood, making sure everything was seasoned right. Filled the shed clean, tight rows, covered in dry. Stocked the cellar with what I'd need, jars, meat, the kind of supplies you don't think about until you don't have them. And somewhere in the back of my mind, that conversation with Denise sat there, not loud, just present. Spring came slow that year. Snow melted uneven. Creeks started swelling again, everything waking up piece by piece. The morning I found the shed, it was quiet. Too quiet. Maybe, though I didn't realize that until later. I walked down with a cup of coffee, same as always, thinking about what needed to be rotated, what I might cut next season, just normal things. Then I saw it. Or, I saw what was left. The structure was still standing, but inside, nothing. No stacks, no neat rows, no sign of what had taken me months to prepare. Just blackened ground, warped metal racks, ash scattered like it had been swept and then left to settle. I stopped walking without meaning to. Just stood there, coffee cooling in my hand, trying to line up what I was seeing with what I knew should be there. Then I noticed the fence, chain cut clean through, and hanging from it, a laminated notice, zip-tied in place like it was supposed to mean something official. I pulled it free, read it once, then again slower. Fire safety violation. Hazardous materials removed under Regulation 8.3. At the bottom, a name. Denise Caldwell. I remember letting out a breath, long and slow, not angry. Not yet, just heavy. Because that wasn't a mistake. That was a decision. And standing there, looking at the ash of everything I'd set aside to get through the next winter, I realized something they hadn't. They thought they had authority. They didn't understand where it actually lived. I stayed there a while longer than I care to admit, just staring at the mess like if I stood still enough it might rewind itself. But it didn't. It just sat there, quiet and final, the kind of quiet that doesn't ask you how you feel about it. And that's when it really started to settle in. Not just what they'd taken, but how casually they must have done it, showing up with trucks, cutting through my fence, clearing out everything I'd worked months to prepare, probably telling themselves they were doing the right thing. That part stuck with me more than the loss. See, I've dealt with people making mistakes before, out in the woods. You learn quick that bad calls happen. But this wasn't that. This had intent behind it. Confidence, the kind that comes from believing you won't be challenged. And I'll be honest, for a minute there, I considered just driving down, knocking on doors, making a lot of noise about it. Would have been easy. Might have even felt good for about 5 minutes. But then what? Arguments, lawyers, months of back and forth, people talking over each other instead of listening. I've seen enough of that to know it rarely fixes anything. It just drags things out until everyone's too tired to care. So instead, I went quiet, went back inside, set that notice on the table, and pulled out a box I hadn't opened in years. Old paperwork, stuff my dad kept organized in a way that made sense to him, property maps, deeds, handwritten notes and margins that only mean something if you know the story behind them. Took me a bit, flipping through brittle pages and old envelopes, until I found what I was looking for. Water rights. Filed under my grandfather's name. Continuous use. Senior claim. Now, I'm not a lawyer, never wanted to be, but I understand enough to know what that means. It means the water running through that dam, through that spillway, it's not just passing by. It's allocated. It's recognized. It belongs, in a legal sense, to this land, my land. And that lake they built their whole neighborhood around, it exists because I let it. That was the first moment something shifted inside me. Not anger, not satisfaction, just clarity. Like suddenly the whole situation snapped into focus, and I could see exactly where the leverage sat. I didn't act right away. That's important. I let it sit overnight, made sure I wasn't reacting off emotion, because once you move on something like this, you don't really get to take it back. Next morning, I drove into town. County office is this small brick building tucked behind the courthouse, same place it's always been. Inside smells like paper, dust, and coffee that's been sitting too long. Woman named Linda works the desk. Been there forever, knows most folks by face if not by name. Caleb, she said when I walked in, peeking over her glasses, what brings you out? Need to double-check something. I told her, setting the documents down. Water rights tied to my parcel, and anything filed downstream. She gave me that look people give when they know it's not a casual question, then got to work. Typed a bit, pulled some records, cross-referenced things the slow, careful way that tells you she's not guessing. After a few minutes, she nodded. Primary rights are yours, she said. Senior claim. No active agreements recorded with Silverline Estates. No agreements at all? I asked. Nothing formal, she replied. If there was ever an arrangement, it wasn't filed. That right there. That's when I knew exactly what I was dealing with. They weren't operating on contracts. They were operating on assumption. I thanked her, took my papers, and headed back out. On the drive up, I passed the entrance to Silverline. Gates sliding open smooth as anything, stone sign polished, everything about it designed to look permanent, controlled. And I remember thinking, none of this holds if the water stops. I didn't go in. Didn't need to. Just kept driving up toward my place, toward the dam. Now the dam itself, it's nothing fancy. Stonework's old, moss growing along the edges, iron wool gate set into the side, worn but solid. You wouldn't look at it twice unless you knew what it did. I stood there for a minute, just looking at it, listening to the water moving the way it always had, steady, dependable. And I thought about that shed, about the ash, about that laminated notice, like they were doing me a favor. Then I made a decision. First thing I did was file a notice with the State Water Board. Intent to perform maintenance on the dam and spillway. Perfectly legal, perfectly normal. Structures like that require upkeep, and part of that can include redirecting flow. There's a requirement, 72 hours notice. So I gave it. Did everything by the book. Then I waited. Didn't call Denise. Didn't go down to the development. Just let the clock run. Went about my day like nothing had changed, even though everything had. 72 hours later, I walked back down to the dam. Put my hand on that iron wheel, felt the cold metal, the weight of it, and I'll admit, I paused for a second. Not because I was unsure, but because I understood exactly what this would set in motion. Then I started turning. At first it resisted, like it had gotten used to sitting in one place. Metal groaned. That low, dragging sound you feel more than hear. I leaned into it, steady pressure, not forcing it, just reminding it how to move. And then it gave. Slow at first, then smoother. The mechanism waking up after years of doing the same thing. The water reacted almost immediately. You could see the current shift, feel it change direction. Instead of flowing clean into the channel that fed their lake, it started pulling back toward the original creek bed, the path it had followed long before anyone decided to reshape it. I kept turning until the spillway was fully redirected. And just like that, their lake stopped getting fed. No drama. No explosion. Just a quiet adjustment that most people wouldn't even notice at first. But I knew. And soon enough, so would they. Day one passed without much happening. From up where I was, everything looked the same. Lake still full, surface calm, nothing to suggest anything had changed. Day two, that's when it started to show. I walked partway down the ridge where you can see the water through the trees, and there it was, subtle, but clear. The shoreline had pulled back, maybe a foot, exposing damp earth that hadn't seen daylight in years. One of the docks sat just slightly off, angle not quite right. I didn't stay long. Didn't need to. By afternoon, I could hear activity down there. People moving around, voices carrying up, that restless energy you get when something's off, but no one's sure why yet. By evening, the fountain stopped. Pumps probably struggling without steady input. The water lost that clean, reflective look, started going dull, heavier somehow. Day three, it got obvious. Water dropped further, a few feet now. Mud showing in patches, edges looking uneven, like something unfinished. I saw birds picking at the shallows where fish had gotten trapped. And then, I heard a car coming up my drive. Fast. Too fast for someone who understands gravel. I stepped out onto the porch just as Denise's SUV came into view, tires kicking up dust, engine cutting off hard. She stepped out quick, no hesitation, no polite setup this time. Walked straight toward me, heels sinking just slightly with each step. "Caleb," she called, voice tight, "we need to talk." I leaned against the railing, calm. "Seems like we are." She stopped a few feet away, glanced past me toward the ridge, then back at me. "Our lake is dropping," she said, like it explained everything. "Residents are concerned. Systems are failing. You need to restore the water immediately." I let that sit for a second, then turned, stepped inside, grabbed something off the table. When I came back out, I handed her an envelope. She looked at it, confused. "What is this?" "Invoice," I said. She opened it, eyes scanning, and I watched the exact moment it landed. $46,000 for destroyed wood and food stores. Itemized. Documented. Below that, 30 years of water usage. Annual rate. Backdated. And then the contract. Future access. Payment terms. Conditions. Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "This is ridiculous," she said, looking up at me. "You can't just do this." "I didn't burn my own supplies," I replied, steady. "And you've been using water that isn't yours." Her jaw tightened. "We acted for safety." "You acted without asking," I said. "On land that isn't yours." She let out a sharp breath, shook her head like she couldn't believe the situation. "You're going to regret this," she said. I met her eyes. Already did. There was a beat there, tension sitting thick between us. Then she laughed, short and cold. "You think you can hold an entire community hostage over this?" I shrugged slightly. "I think you should have knocked on my door." That hit harder than anything else I'd said. For a second, she didn't have a response. Then she turned, walked back to her SUV, and drove off without another word. I watched the dust settle behind her, then went back inside, closed the door, and let the silence settle in again. Because now it wasn't just about what they'd done. It was about what they were about to learn. After she drove off, things didn't get loud, they got tense, the kind of tension that builds quietly, like pressure behind something you can't see yet, but know is there. And over the next couple days, that pressure started showing itself in ways you don't need to be close to understand. By day 4, I didn't even have to walk down the ridge to know it was getting worse. You could hear it, not water, but the lack of it. Pumps kicking on, then off. Generators humming where there hadn't been any before. Voices carrying farther than they should, sharp and short. People talking over each other instead of with each other. I drove into town that morning just to keep routine, and on the way back I saw a couple residents near the entrance of Silverline, standing by their cars, phones out, pointing back toward the lake like they were trying to fix it with conversation alone. One of them flagged me down. "Hey," he said, leaning toward my window, trying to sound casual, but not quite pulling it off. "You live up past the ridge, right?" "Yeah," I said. He glanced back over his shoulder. "You know anything about what's going on with the water?" I looked at him for a second. He didn't look like someone who'd ever cut through a fence or signed off on burning someone else's property. Just someone who bought into a place that came with assumptions. "Maintenance," I said. "Filed properly." He nodded slowly, but his eyes didn't settle. "Is it temporary?" I shrugged a little. "That depends." "On what?" I didn't say. By the time I got back up to my place, the sky had that late afternoon color, and from the ridge, you could see more of the lake bed than water now. The illusion was breaking. Day 5. That's when it stopped being a concern and turned into a problem they couldn't ignore. The water had pulled back far enough that the shape of the land underneath started to show, uneven, cracked mud, dark patches where things had been sitting too long without air. The docks weren't just tilted anymore. Some of them were useless, hanging over empty space. The fountains were off, pipes exposed, the whole place looking less like a luxury feature and more like something unfinished. And the smell, that crept in slow, not overwhelming, but enough to remind you that what used to look clean was just being managed. I saw more people out that day than I had in months. Groups forming, breaking apart, reforming, conversations happening in pieces, like nobody had the full picture, but everyone felt the impact. Late afternoon, 2 cars came up my drive. Denise stepped out first, same controlled energy, but thinner now, like something underneath was starting to wear. The second car, a man got out, mid-50s, sleeves rolled, that practice calm you see in people who deal with problems for a living. Lawyer, no doubt. They walked up together. "Caleb," Denise started, skipping the formalities this time. "We need to resolve this." I didn't move from where I was leaning against the porch. "I gave you a way to." The man stepped forward slightly. "Richard Lawson," he said. "I represent the association." I nodded once. "Figured." He gave a polite half-smile. "We've reviewed your claims. While your position has merit, the current situation is causing significant harm to residents." I let that hang there for a second. Didn't see much concern for harm when my place got cleared out. Denise stepped in sharper. "We've acknowledged that mistake." "No," I said, straightening up now. "You labeled it a safety action." That hit a nerve. You could see it in the way her expression tightened. Richard adjusted, trying to bring it back to neutral ground. "We're here to find a solution." "There is one," I said. "It's in the folder." He opened it again, slower this time, reading like it mattered now. "This level of retroactive charge," he started, "is what happens when something gets taken for granted. I cut in. Denise crossed her arms. You're exploiting a technicality. I shook my head slightly. No, I'm correcting an assumption. That landed heavier than she expected. There was a long pause after that. Not loud, not aggressive, just quiet enough that nobody could hide behind noise anymore. Finally, Richard looked up. If we agree to these terms, he said carefully, you'll restore the water immediately? I met his eyes. I'll restore it when the agreement's signed and the first payment clears. Denise let out a breath through her nose, frustration slipping through just enough to show. This is going to cost people more than you think, she said. I gave a small shrug. So did what you burned. They didn't have much left to argue after that. A few more questions, timelines, details, but the fight had shifted. It wasn't about whether I could do what I'd done anymore. It was about what it would take to make it stop. They left without shaking hands. Day 6 came and went with more of the same. Except now you could feel something changing underneath it. Not panic exactly, but urgency. Word had spread. People were talking about property values, about long-term impact, about things that don't recover as easily as a water level. And then day 7. I was out by what was left of the shed, clearing debris, trying to figure out what could be rebuilt, when I heard a car coming up again. Just one this time. Denise stepped out alone. No heels. No sharp presentation. Just practical shoes, simple clothes, still composed, but not performing anymore. She walked up slower than before, stopped a few feet away, held out an envelope. Full compensation, she said, for the damages. I took it, felt the weight of it, but didn't open it yet. And the contract? I asked. Signed, she said. 5 years prepaid. Terms accepted. I watched her for a second. There was something different in her now. Not weakness. Not exactly. Just awareness. Like she'd finally adjusted to the reality of the situation instead of trying to bend it. You understand the conditions, I said. She nodded once. We do. Access to my land requires permission. Yes. Any construction near the water line gets approved by me. Yes. And if anyone crosses that line again. I let it hang for a second, not needing to finish it. She finished it anyway, quieter this time. You closed the spillway. I nodded. That's right. A small pause. Then she asked, will you restore the water? I looked past her, down toward the ridge, where the lake sat low and exposed, no longer pretending to be something it wasn't. Yeah, I said. I will. She gave a short nod, turned, and walked back to her car without another word. No apology. Didn't need one. I waited a while before heading down to the dam. No rush. Just the same path, same stones, same iron wool sitting where it always had. I put my hand on it again, and this time, it moved easier. Water shifted back, finding the channel that fed their lake, filling it slowly, steadily, like nothing had ever happened. But something had, because now they knew that the thing they built their view around wasn't theirs to control. And a week later, when I saw a couple of them walking near the ridge again, they stayed well clear of my boundary. One of them gave me a nod. I nodded back. That was enough. Now here's the part I've thought about more than anything since all this happened. I didn't do it because I hate them. I didn't do it to prove a point. Truth is, I would have kept that water flowing for free, same as always, if they'd just knocked on my door and treated me like I existed. But they didn't. They made a decision, and I answered it. So let me ask you something. Was that justice, or did I go too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I can tell you how it felt from my side, but I'm curious how it looks from yours.